The clock read 2:17 a.m. when the emergency line rang at the county dispatch center. A woman's voice, frantic and broken, gasped through sobs, "There's been a break-in. My husband's been shot, please, hurry." Within minutes, the quiet suburban street of Willow Creek Drive erupted in flashing red and blue lights. Neighbors peeked from their windows as officers rushed toward the white, two-story colonial at the end of the cul-de-sac. The caller, Karen Doyle, stood barefoot on the front lawn, trembling in a torn nightgown, her hands and face streaked with what looked like blood. Inside, the scene appeared chaotic. Drawers were yanked open, cushions tossed, picture frames shattered. In the master bedroom lay Michael Doyle, 42, co-owner of a small but thriving family logistics company. He had been shot twice, once in the chest, once in the shoulder. A pistol lay nearby, its magazine half empty. At first glance, it looked like a violent home invasion gone wrong. But seasoned officers noticed oddities almost immediately. The broken window near the back door had glass scattered outside, not inside. Expensive electronics, jewelry, and cash were untouched. And the intruder's path through the house made little sense, more theatrical than purposeful. Detective Laura Kent, a calm yet sharp investigator known for spotting inconsistencies others missed, surveyed the scene carefully. Something about the layout bothered her. Why were only 3 shell casings in the bedroom, when the magazine suggested more shots had been fired? And why did Karen's injuries, minor cuts, a few bruises, seem oddly deliberate, almost placed? Michael was rushed to the hospital but pronounced deceased within the hour. When the news reached his 2 teenage children, Ethan and Lily, they burst into tears. Karen clung to them, crying uncontrollably, insisting through sobs, "He tried to protect us. He fought them off." But by morning, quiet suspicion had already taken root. Detectives began their interviews before dawn. Karen repeated her story with trembling precision. She had woken to the sound of breaking glass, seen a masked figure at the door, screamed, and heard gunfire. She claimed she tried to wrestle the gun away but was thrown against a dresser. Her version was emotional but too rehearsed. When asked which door the intruder used, she hesitated, glancing toward the back of the house before settling on, "The kitchen one, I think." Detective Kent walked through the supposed entry. The lock was damaged, but oddly, from the inside. And the glass, scattered neatly outside the doorway, told its own story. Later that morning, forensics found 4 additional shell casings, inside the laundry room washing machine. "Someone tried to hide evidence," Kent muttered to her partner. "And they didn't expect we'd look there." Ballistics confirmed all casings came from the same weapon, a 9mm registered to Michael Doyle himself. That evening, as the family stayed with relatives, Kent's team learned more about the Doyles' life. On paper, they seemed picture-perfect, a stable marriage, 2 kids, a growing transport business. But money was tight lately. Tax liens, unpaid invoices, and suspicious withdrawals appeared in the company's records. And every one of those transactions led back to Karen Doyle's signature. At sunrise the next day, a neighbor recalled hearing muffled arguing around 1:45 a.m., a woman's voice raised, followed by 2 sharp bangs. No sign of another person entering or leaving the home. The supposed burglary was beginning to look like something far more personal. As Detective Kent reviewed the evidence board, photos of the bedroom, the misplaced glass, the hidden casings, the untouched valuables, one thought echoed in her mind. This wasn't a home invasion. It was a performance. And the actress standing at the center of it all was about to face the hardest spotlight of her life. By the 3rd day, the shock that had rippled through the quiet Willow Creek neighborhood had settled into hushed suspicion. The Doyles' home invasion was no longer front-page tragedy, it was a puzzle. And Detective Laura Kent was determined to fit every piece into place. At the precinct, Karen Doyle sat in the interview room, wrapped in a gray blanket, her eyes swollen from tears. She looked fragile, but Kent had seen that before: grief, guilt, fear, they often wore the same mask. Karen, Kent began gently, sliding a cup of coffee across the table, I want to understand what happened that night. Walk me through it again, slowly. Karen sniffled. I told you, we were asleep. I woke up to a noise. Michael went to check, and then I heard shots. I ran after him, but, her voice cracked, it was too late. Kent nodded. And the intruder? He was wearing black. A mask. I didn't see his face. Did he take anything? Karen paused, frowning slightly. No, maybe he panicked. Kent leaned back. Your neighbors didn't see anyone running from the house. And there were no footprints outside the window, just glass scattered outward. That's not typical of a break-in. Karen's lips parted, but no words came. Her gaze flickered down to her shaking hands. Kent continued, we found some bullet casings in your washing machine. That's unusual, don't you think? Karen looked up, startled. I don't know how they got there. Maybe the intruder. Kent's expression didn't change. You think the intruder shot your husband, then gathered casings and hid them in your laundry room? For a moment, silence filled the small space. The only sound was the soft hum of the fluorescent light above. I don't know what you're implying, Karen said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Kent closed her notebook. I'm not implying anything. But I think there's more to this story. Back at the station, forensic reports began pouring in. Michael Doyle's gunshot residue pattern indicated he had been shot from less than 5 feet away, suggesting the shooter was standing close, almost face to face. His wounds also showed no defensive marks, which meant he hadn't fought back. Whoever pulled that trigger, Kent told her partner, he, or she, wasn't a stranger. The autopsy also confirmed something else, the first bullet had been instantly fatal. The second shot, fired moments later, hit post-mortem. A detail that, to Kent, felt more emotional than accidental. Meanwhile, the financial investigation deepened. The Doyle's company, Doyle Freight Solutions, had recently come under government scrutiny for missing tax payments. Over $80,000 was unaccounted for, transferred quietly into a personal account under Karen Doyle's name. Worse, phone records revealed that she had impersonated her husband on several business calls, using his email, forging his signature, even responding to clients pretending to be him. Her motive, at least in part, was coming into focus. But there was something else, a calendar reminder on Michael's laptop, meeting, State Revenue Office, Friday 9 a.m. The meeting was scheduled for the morning after his death. It was set to expose the missing funds. Kent exhaled. He was going to find out. The breakthrough came when the children were interviewed again, this time separately. 15-year-old Lily seemed nervous, wringing her hands as she spoke. Mom said someone broke in, she whispered. But I didn't hear anyone. Just them arguing. Arguing? Kent asked softly. About what? I don't know. Dad sounded really angry. He said something like, you lied to me. Then I heard the gun. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Mom told me not to say that part. She said people wouldn't understand. Kent's pen stopped mid-scribble. That single sentence rewrote everything. By nightfall, the evidence board was filled, photos, reports, timelines. The supposed home invasion was nothing but smoke and mirrors. The real story, it seemed, was one of fear and exposure. Karen Doyle had been living a double life, embezzling from the family business, hiding mounting debts, and pretending all was fine. And when the truth threatened to surface, the illusion shattered. Detective Kent stood before the board, studying the faces in the photos, Michael, smiling in his company uniform, Karen, standing beside him at a fundraiser, perfect posture, perfect hair. Behind that perfect image was something darker. She turned to her partner. Tomorrow, we bring her back in. This time, no soft questions. Outside the station, the night was still, the hum of streetlights the only sound. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a reminder that in Willow Creek, peace had already been broken. By the time Karen Doyle returned to the precinct, she was no longer the composed widow who had once faced the cameras in tears. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes hollowed by sleepless nights. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the growing weight of suspicion pressing down on her. Detective Laura Kent watched her from behind the two-way mirror. "She's cracking," Kent said quietly to her partner, Detective Ramirez. "She's terrified," Ramirez replied. "But I'm not sure if it's guilt, or fear of getting caught." When Kent entered the room, Karen's gaze darted up. "You wanted to see me again?" she asked, her tone brittle. "Yes," Kent said evenly. "There are a few things we need to clarify." Karen nodded, though her hands trembled as she folded them on the table. Kent began by laying out a series of photographs. The shattered glass outside the back door. The unruffled valuables on the dresser. The hidden shell casings in the washing machine. And finally, bank records, neatly printed in chronological order. Karen's expression tightened as Kent spoke. "These transfers," Kent said, tapping a page, "all lead to your personal account. Large withdrawals, thousands of dollars at a time. And the same week your husband scheduled a meeting with the state to review missing company funds, he's killed in a supposed home invasion." Karen swallowed hard. "That money, it wasn't what it looks like. It was temporary. I meant to pay it back. We were behind on bills. Michael didn't understand how bad things had gotten. So you forged his signature? Pretended to be him on business calls?" Kent's voice was calm but unyielding. "That's not desperation, Mrs. Doyle. That's deception." Karen's lower lip trembled. "You don't understand. I did everything for that family. Michael left me to handle everything while he played the hero at work." Kent leaned in. "And when he finally realized what you'd done?" Karen's eyes flashed with anger. "He wasn't supposed to find out like that. He was going to humiliate me. The government meeting, he was going to blame it all on me, ruin everything I built." Her words hung in the air like a confession wrapped in self-pity. Kent let the silence linger, then said softly, "You argued that night, didn't you? The children heard it. He confronted you about the missing money." Karen shook her head violently. "No. It wasn't like that. We argued, yes, but then we heard something, someone outside. He went to check." Kent interrupted, her tone cool. "And you followed him? With his gun?" Karen froze. "Ballistics prove the shots came from Michael's own firearm," Kent continued. "No prints but yours and his. And your bruises? The medical examiner says they're inconsistent with a struggle, they look self-inflicted." Karen's breathing grew shallow. She pressed her palms to her temples. "You're twisting everything," she whispered. "You don't know what it's like to feel trapped. Every day, I was pretending for him, for the kids, for everyone. I couldn't let it fall apart." Kent's voice softened, though her eyes remained firm. "You could have told him the truth." Karen looked up, her face streaked with tears. "He wouldn't have forgiven me. He was going to take the kids, the business, everything. I just wanted to scare him, make him listen." Kent leaned back, exhaling slowly. "But he didn't get up again, did he?" For the first time, Karen's composure crumbled completely. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "I didn't mean to. I swear, it just happened so fast. He said he was done with me. He said I'd ruined everything." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I grabbed the gun from the dresser. He tried to take it, there was a flash, a noise, and then he fell. The room fell silent except for the faint hum of the air vent. Kent watched as Karen's confession hung heavy between them, raw, fractured, but unmistakably real. When Karen finally looked up, her face was ghostly pale. I panicked. I thought, if I made it look like a robbery, maybe people would believe me. I didn't want the kids to know. I just couldn't lose everything. Kent stood slowly, her voice steady. Karen Doyle, I'm placing you under arrest for the death of your husband, Michael Doyle. As she read the Miranda rights, Karen sat motionless, her tears now silent. When the door opened and the handcuffs clicked shut, she didn't resist. She simply stared ahead, murmuring, I only wanted to fix it. I just wanted to fix it. Outside, the morning sun was rising over Willow Creek, golden light spilling across the roofs of quiet houses. But for the Doyle family, that light revealed only shadows, of secrets, lies, and the irreversible moment that had destroyed them all. The news of Karen Doyle's arrest spread through Willow Creek before noon. By sunset, the quiet suburb had turned into a stage for whispers, speculation, and disbelief. The same neighbors who once waved at Karen during her morning jogs now stood at the edge of their lawns, watching as police cars lined the driveway of the Doyle home once again. Inside, crime scene technicians moved methodically, photographing, dusting, collecting. The staged chaos from that night looked different now under the harsh light of reality. It wasn't the wreckage of a burglary, it was the debris of a desperate cover-up. Detective Laura Kent stood near the bedroom doorway, arms crossed, scanning the room one final time. Every detail, she murmured to herself, was designed to convince us she was a victim. Her partner, Ramirez, looked up from a box of evidence. She almost pulled it off, too. If she hadn't hidden those casings, we might still be chasing a phantom intruder. Kent nodded. Guilt always leaves fingerprints. They're just not always on the trigger. At the precinct, Karen sat in an interrogation room for the last time, this time in an orange jumpsuit. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her voice low, almost detached. She'd already signed her confession, but Detective Kent had one final question. When you shot him, Kent asked quietly, was it anger, or fear? Karen stared at the table for a long time. Finally, she said, both. He wasn't supposed to die. I just wanted him to stop yelling, to stop saying I'd destroyed everything. Her hands twisted together, pale and trembling. I thought I could fix it after. Make it look like someone broke in. The kids, they'd still have their mother. Kent didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm. They still do. But not the one they remember. Karen looked up sharply, her expression wounded, almost childlike. Do you think they'll ever forgive me? Kent hesitated. That's not for me to say. The following week, the district attorney held a press conference. Cameras flashed as he confirmed what most had already guessed. Karen Doyle had been charged with second-degree murder and obstruction of justice. The alleged motive, financial fraud and fear of exposure, was laid bare for all to see. Reporters swarmed, asking if the case was driven by greed or panic. Both, the D, answered simply. This was a tragedy born from deception, and the fear of losing control. For the Doyle children, the public spectacle was unbearable. Ethan withdrew completely, refusing to speak to anyone but his grandparents. Lily, whose statement had helped break the case, blamed herself for everything. If I hadn't said anything, she whispered to her aunt, maybe they wouldn't have taken her away. But the adults knew better. Silence, in this case, would only have buried the truth deeper. Back in her office, Detective Kent sat staring at the evidence board one last time. The photos, documents, and timelines were now familiar ghosts. The board told the full story, from the supposed home invasion to the unraveling of a carefully built illusion. She removed each piece slowly, placing it into the case folder. When she reached the photo of Michael Doyle, a smiling father holding his daughter at a company picnic, she paused. He never knew how close his life was to collapsing, she said quietly. Ramirez glanced over. Sometimes people don't want to see what's coming. Kent nodded. And sometimes, the person standing beside them is the storm. The trial date was set for early spring. Karen's defense team planned to argue diminished capacity, claiming she had acted under extreme emotional distress. But the prosecution had something stronger, a timeline that painted her not as panicked, but prepared. She had staged the scene, hidden evidence, and coached her children on what to say. It wasn't a moment of blind rage, it was fear turned deliberate. Karen's lawyer begged her to take a plea. At first, she refused, insisting she could explain herself, that people would understand she hadn't meant to kill him. But each time she replayed that night, the truth became harder to reshape. In the end, she agreed. Detective Kent attended the plea hearing. The courtroom was somber, lined with friends, reporters, and neighbors. When Karen stood before the judge, her voice shook as she admitted guilt to manslaughter in exchange for a reduced sentence. "I never wanted to hurt him," she said, tears sliding down her face. "I just wanted to make it right. I see now that I destroyed everything I loved." The judge's tone was measured but heavy. "You made choices that took a man's life and scarred your children forever. That is something no sentence can repair." Karen Doyle was sentenced to 25 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 18. As she was led away, she turned once toward the gallery. Ethan and Lily weren't there. Only Detective Kent met her gaze. For a fleeting second, Kent saw something almost peaceful in Karen's eyes, as if the performance was finally over. That night, Kent drove past Willow Creek Drive. The Doyle house was dark, the "for sale" sign already staked into the ground. Wind rustled the trees, carrying with it the faint echo of a woman's sobs, a sound that once could have been mistaken for grief, but was now recognized as guilt. In a town that prized its calm and order, one truth remained: behind even the most polished doors, storms can brew unseen, and sometimes the danger isn't outside trying to break in, it's already home. Spring arrived early in Willow Creek, but the warmth did little to thaw the chill that lingered over the Doyle family name. The once vibrant two-story home at the end of the cul-de-sac stood silent now, its windows shuttered, the "for sale" sign tilting in the damp grass. The children had moved in with their grandparents across town, leaving behind bedrooms still frozen in time, school trophies, photographs, half-packed boxes, and the faint echo of laughter that once filled the halls. Detective Laura Kent passed the house on her morning run sometimes. Each time she slowed down, her eyes drawn to the window of the master bedroom, the place where everything had changed. Even months later, she still couldn't shake the image of the ransacked scene, or the way Karen's trembling hands had clutched her confession form. The case was closed, but closure was harder to find. In the weeks following the sentencing, the community struggled to make sense of what had happened. Michael Doyle's funeral had taken place months earlier, yet people still spoke of him in the present tense, as if saying his name in the past felt like betrayal. At St. Anne's Church, where the Doyles had once sat together every Sunday, pews filled with murmured conversations about forgiveness and faith. Some defended Karen, saying she'd simply broken under pressure. Others condemned her, calling her actions selfish, unforgivable. Ethan, now 17, avoided those conversations entirely. He refused counseling, keeping his grief buried behind a wall of silence. He spent hours at his grandfather's workshop, building furniture out of scrap wood, the sound of hammering his only outlet. His sister Lily, softer and more open, tried to understand. She wrote her mother letters, long, rambling notes about school, the weather, and memories from before everything fell apart. But she never sent them. The words always stopped midway through a sentence, as if she couldn't decide how to end them. "Do you think she still thinks about us?" she asked her grandmother one night. Her grandmother hesitated, setting down her knitting. "Every day, sweetheart. But sometimes thinking isn't enough to make things right. Lily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I just wish she'd told the truth before it got this bad. Meanwhile, Karen began serving her sentence at the state correctional facility 2 hours north. Prison life stripped away the veneer of control she'd once fought so hard to maintain. Gone were the polished clothes, the carefully styled hair, the practiced smile. In their place was quiet resignation. She kept to herself, avoiding trouble, spending most of her days in the library. Guards said she rarely spoke unless spoken to. She received no visitors, though she was allowed 1 phone call a week. For the first 3 months, she didn't use it. But one Sunday afternoon, she finally picked up the receiver. The voice on the other end, shy, hesitant, belonged to Lily. Hi, Mom. Karen froze, pressing the phone to her ear. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Lily? Is that really you? Yeah. Grandpa said it was okay to call. Tears filled Karen's eyes. I'm so sorry, baby. I've wanted to talk to you for so long. There was silence on the line. Then Lily whispered, I know. I just wanted to hear your voice. Karen swallowed hard. Are you okay? Is your brother? We're trying, Lily said. I miss Dad. Karen's voice cracked. I miss him too. Every day. The line went quiet again, but in that fragile silence, something unspoken passed between them, a sliver of forgiveness, not yet whole, but real enough to matter. When the call ended, Karen sat alone for a long time, the receiver still warm in her hand. She knew there would be no easy redemption. Some things couldn't be undone, but perhaps, piece by piece, they could be faced. Detective Kent learned of the call weeks later through the prison's report. She was glad. For all the tragedy the case had brought, she hoped the children wouldn't carry its full weight forever. Still, Kent couldn't shake the question that had haunted her since the night of the murder: how did love and fear twist together so tightly that one could destroy the other? Late one evening, she sat at her desk, the city quiet beyond the window. She flipped open her case journal to the final page and wrote a single line. Sometimes, it's not hate that kills, it's the terror of losing love. She closed the file and placed it in the archive, among hundreds of others. But this one, she knew, would stay with her. In Willow Creek, life began to move on, slowly, cautiously. New families toured the Doyle house, unaware of its past. The grass grew again, the flowers returned, and the street, once filled with flashing lights, fell silent. But for those who remembered, the story of Karen and Michael Doyle remained a quiet warning, that beneath even the calmest surface, secrets can swell until they shatter everything built upon them. 5 years passed. Time moved differently for everyone touched by the Doyle case. For some, it blurred the edges of memory, for others, it only sharpened the pain. At the state correctional facility in northern Georgia, Karen Doyle had grown older, quieter, almost unrecognizable from the woman who once smiled for holiday photos in a spotless kitchen. Her hair had turned a shade of gray that matched the walls around her, and her posture had softened, as though the weight of her choices pressed down on her shoulders each day. She worked in the prison library now, cataloging old books, repairing torn pages, finding solace in silence. The guards described her as polite, obedient, invisible. For Karen, invisibility was a kind of peace. Every few months, she received letters from Lily, simple updates about school, friends, and life outside the razor wire. The first letters had been hesitant, but over time, they grew longer, more open, filled with small moments of hope. Ethan, however, never wrote. Karen didn't blame him. She knew the kind of anger that silence could hide. One spring afternoon, Karen was summoned to the visitation room. She expected another meeting with the counselor. Instead, when the door opened, Detective Laura Kent stood there, holding a thin manila folder. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The sound of the door locking behind them echoed like a reminder of how much distance lay between their lives now. Karen finally broke the silence. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Kent nodded slightly. "I wasn't sure I'd come back. But I wanted to close this chapter the right way." Karen gestured to the seat across from her. "After everything, I'm surprised you'd bother." "I don't come for you," Kent said evenly. "I come for the truth." She opened the folder and placed a photo on the table, a picture of Lily, now 20, standing in front of a community college sign. She was smiling. Karen's breath caught. "She looks happy." "She's doing well," Kent said. "Your son, too. He started working with his grandfather's business. Quiet kid, but he's steady. They both survived this, Karen. You should know that." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "I used to dream they'd forget me. It seemed kinder that way." Kent shook her head. "They won't forget. But they'll learn how to live beyond it. That's what healing looks like." Karen's gaze dropped to her hands. "Do you ever stop thinking about the people in your cases?" "Not really," Kent said softly. "But I try to remember them as they were before everything fell apart. It helps me see the line between mistake and choice." Karen gave a sad smile. "My mistake was thinking I could control everything. My choice was pulling that trigger." Kent studied her quietly. There was no denial now, no pretense. Only truth, raw and unadorned. As their meeting drew to a close, Kent reached into her pocket and slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "Your daughter wrote this for you. She sent it to my office by mistake." Karen hesitated, her fingers trembling as she unfolded it. The handwriting was careful, every word pressed with meaning. "Mom, I don't hate you anymore. I don't understand everything, but I know you were scared. I still wish things had been different, but I'm trying to forgive you. For both of us." Tears spilled down Karen's cheeks as she read the final line aloud. "I love you. Always will." For the first time in years, her sobs were not from shame, but from release. Kent stood quietly, then said, "She's stronger than she realizes." Karen looked up, eyes red but steady. "She must take after her father." "No," Kent said softly. "She takes after you, at least the part of you that's still trying to make things right." Later that night, Kent drove back through the winding roads that led away from the prison. The radio was low, her mind replaying Karen's words. There was no satisfaction in seeing her confined, only a quiet ache for everything that had been lost. When she reached Willow Creek, she slowed near the end of the cul-de-sac. The Doyle house had been sold long ago, now painted a soft blue with a swing set in the yard. A young family lived there, laughter spilling through open windows. Kent smiled faintly. "New memories," she whispered. In the fading light, it was easy to imagine that the ghosts of that home had finally been put to rest. Back in her cell, Karen placed her daughter's letter inside the worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that she kept by her bunk. It was her most treasured possession now, a reminder that even after the worst mistakes, fragments of grace could still exist. She whispered a quiet prayer that her children would never repeat her errors, that they would choose truth before fear. As the lights dimmed across the prison, Karen lay awake, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream, not of escape, but of redemption. 15 years after the night that shattered her world, Karen Doyle stood beneath the pale morning sky outside the state correctional facility, a small cardboard box in her hands. Inside were the sum of her years behind bars, a few books, photographs of her children, and a single folded letter that had grown soft at the edges from being read too many times. When the gate closed behind her, the metallic clang carried a strange finality. For the first time in over a decade, there was no guard's voice, no count, no schedule to obey. Only silence. A state worker drove her to a halfway house on the outskirts of Savannah, a small, beige building surrounded by pine trees. Karen had been granted parole for good behavior. The papers described her as low risk and fully rehabilitated. But stepping back into a world that had moved on without her didn't feel like freedom. It felt like walking into a life that no longer recognized her. Her first few weeks were spent in quiet observation. Technology had changed, the town had changed, and even her reflection seemed foreign. The woman staring back at her in the mirror bore no resemblance to the one in those old family photographs, the confident businesswoman, the smiling wife, the mother who once believed she had everything under control. Karen took a job cleaning offices at night. It was lonely work, but it suited her. Sometimes, as she wiped down the glass doors of an empty conference room, she saw her faint reflection and whispered to it, "You're still here." She didn't expect to see her children again. The letters from Lily had stopped 2 years earlier, and Ethan had never written. She understood. Forgiveness couldn't be demanded, it had to be earned, if it came at all. Then, one Sunday in early autumn, a letter arrived. The return address was unfamiliar, but the handwriting stopped her breath. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot lately. Lily told me she visited you once. I wasn't ready then. Maybe I am now. If you want to see us, we'll be at Willow Creek Park next Saturday. Noon. Ethan." Karen read the note 3 times before setting it gently on the table. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "Thank you." The park was bright and alive that Saturday, children laughing, leaves drifting in the soft wind. Karen sat on a bench near the lake, clutching the strap of her old canvas purse as though it anchored her to the earth. She didn't know what to expect, anger, tears, silence, but she knew she had to face it. When they arrived, she almost didn't recognize them. Ethan, tall and steady like his father, with a hint of gray already at his temples. Lily, grown into a woman who carried warmth in her eyes despite everything she'd endured. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Lily stepped forward and hugged her. It wasn't a long embrace, but it was real. Karen felt her daughter's heartbeat against her chest and knew that even after years of pain, something fragile and human still connected them. Ethan approached slowly. His face was unreadable, his arms crossed. "You look different," he said. Karen gave a faint smile. "I feel different." They sat together on the bench. The conversation was cautious at first, small talk about work, the weather, the city. But as the minutes passed, the distance between them seemed to shrink. "I used to hate you," Ethan admitted quietly. "For a long time." "I know," Karen said softly. "You had every right to." He nodded. "But I realized hating you just kept me stuck in that house. I didn't want to live there anymore, not in my head." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "You didn't deserve any of this. Neither of you did." Lily reached out and took her mother's hand. "We all made it through, Mom. That's what matters now." For the first time in 15 years, Karen allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't lost everything. A few months later, Detective Laura Kent received a letter of her own. It was handwritten in neat cursive. "Detective Kent, I wanted you to know that I saw my children again. It wasn't easy, but it was honest. You once said that healing means learning to live beyond what happened. I think I finally understand. Thank you for treating me like a person, even when I didn't deserve it. Karen Doyle." Kent folded the letter and slipped it into a drawer beside her old case files. She didn't add a note or a reply, just sat there for a while, letting the quiet fill the room. Outside, the evening sun washed the streets of Willow Creek in gold. The Doyle home had long since been renovated, its past absorbed into the rhythm of everyday life. New laughter drifted from its porch, the kind of sound that made it easy to believe that darkness could fade, if given enough time. Kent looked out the window, her reflection faint against the glass. Justice, she thought, was never perfect. It didn't bring people back or erase pain. But sometimes, it opened the door just wide enough for Grace to step through. Karen Doyle spent her remaining years living quietly by the coast, volunteering at a women's shelter. She never remarried, never sought attention, never spoke publicly about the crime. To those who met her later in life, she was simply Miss Karen, kind, patient, and endlessly gentle. When she passed away at 62, her children attended the small memorial by the ocean. Lily placed a single white rose on the water, whispering, "You found your peace, Mom." Ethan stood beside her, silent but unflinching, his hand resting on his sister's shoulder. The tide rolled in, soft and steady, carrying the flower out toward the horizon. And with it, perhaps, the last echo of a story that had once torn their lives apart, now ending not in tragedy, but in forgiveness. In the end, the Doyle case was not just about crime or punishment, it was about the human cost of secrets and the fragile possibility of redemption. Greed and fear had destroyed a family, but time, truth, and grace had helped rebuild what was left. And sometimes, that is the closest thing to justice the world can offer.